Hi, it's Charlie Minato from halfwheel.com, and this is the HumidiMeter. It's the product that I am reviewing today. But before we get started talking about this, I think it's probably best to talk about smoking meats or maybe cooking a prime rib, because it really helps to understand this product. So for a long time, the best option you had in terms of trying to know how smoking meats or cooking a prime rib was going was the thermometer that's built into your oven or attached to your smoker. And that tells you what the temperature is in the air in the smoker or in the oven. And that's helpful, but it's not the best measurement that you could have to knowing how well the cooking is going. That would be to know what the internal temperature of the meat is. And fortunately, somebody realized this and they created a device called a meat probe. And so what it does is it goes inside, usually the thickest part of the meat, and some of them attach like via wire, and they have a screen on the end of it. I'm sure you're seeing on the screen right now. And then some of them actually now can communicate via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and so they can send alerts to your phone to let you know when the meat has reached your desired temperature, and you can take it off the grill or off the smoker and let it rest and then get ready to eat. And that essentially is what this device is, only for your cigars and not for temperature, but for moisture. So this is a humidor, and this is also not the first take, so it's going to read a little bit low. So you can see right here is a digital hygrometer. It sits on the lid of the humidor, and there are three things you kind of want to pay attention to. So you've got the temperature right here, you have the relative humidity right here, and then you have this right here, which is where the sensor actually lies. And you can see it's saying 72 degrees Fahrenheit, a little hot thanks to the lights, and 52% relative humidity, which is substantially lower than what you probably would want this to be at and what it's normally at, but once again, not the first take. So that's telling you what the relative humidity and the temperature is in the air inside of the humidor, or specifically what's on the sensor. What it's not doing is telling you what the moisture content is for the cigars. And in this particular humidor, there's going to be some differences because these cigars, or this cigar right here, you can see is not stored in one of these bags. And the bags are open a little bit, but they are likely not getting as much of the humidity as that VSG right there. And that's where the humidimeter comes into play. So the way the device works, you're going to hit the on button, you're going to take off the lid. It is a little tough to get off, or tougher than it might seem to get off, and it is also attached via string. Now the reason behind that is because these probes are sensitive and you really want to keep them protected. So once the on button is hit, this device is just going to go straight into the bottom of your cigar. And so you're just going to stick the prongs in the bottom, and you want to push in all the way. You can get your just the tip jokes out, and then you can see it's reading 71% up there. Now alternatively, you can also run it into the cap of the cigar. Now this is going to puncture the cap, so it's going to leave a mark. The other thing it's also likely going to do is it's going to produce slightly higher results than the foot, and that's just some simple physics here because the foot is open, so the air can go in and out of the foot, whereas in the cap it's closed, and so the moisture gets trapped. Now you can see there are some small 2 holes now in the cap. I don't think this is going to affect smoking at all. You're just going to cut it off. I'm sure at like a very, very fine detail it would affect it because you're changing the composure of the cigar ever so slightly, but not in a way that I would imagine is noticeable. So that is the basic use of the device. There is the optional $10 calibration device right here. It looks like a 9-volt battery, and the way this works is you stick the 2 probes right in the center of the screw. Got to make sure the device is on. And the idea is that it should deliver a 70% reading. And so you'll know if it's not giving you a 70% reading, then the device is not working correctly. For anyone that hasn't watched this video or isn't a chemist or a physicist, this device is very, very simple. You open it up, you stick it in the cigar, and it gives you a reading that is relative humidity, right? That's what presumably you think is going on. And the number that's coming out of here is supposed to be relative humidity or converted relative humidity. But the problem is that this device can't actually measure relative humidity, and that's because of a science issue. Relative humidity is what is the moisture that's in the air, or I would imagine any gas, but it specifically refers to moisture in the air. And that's what we use to talk about the moisture that's in the humidors. The problem is that you can't measure relative humidity of a solid object like a cigar. And so what this device actually is something called a moisture meter, and it's measuring a unit called moisture content, which is something that refers to the moisture that is in a solid object. Moisture meters are used for things like building materials or wood when you try to want to figure out if you're able to safely construct something or if you're trying to find a leak. A moisture meter is really, really helpful. The issue, though, is that a moisture meter produces moisture content results. That's the units that we refer to the measurements in. And the problem is that moisture content for a cigar, according to CigarMedics, a good cigar in terms of smoking condition, should be between 12.5% and 15%. And this is confusing because your humidor is supposed to be around 70%, but your cigar is now supposed to be between 12.5% and 15%. You can see where the confusion lies. So what CigarMedics did is they took a moisture meter and they made two notable changes. The first is that the moisture detecting probes are a lot closer together than most other moisture meters, particularly most of the ones that are, say, under $400. The second thing that they did is rather than giving you a readout in moisture content, they're doing it in relative humidity. And so what they did was they measured a whole bunch of cigars, different sizes, different types of tobaccos, and also different temperatures as to when they measured it, because temperature is a really, really important variable for measuring humidity and moisture. And then they created a formula so that way you can easily understand what's going on. And so it's easy, particularly if you don't watch this video and don't really realize that you can't measure relative humidity of solid object, but it's a little bit confusing, and it also kind of raises one major issue, which is that you're only reliant on it's only as good as the formula is. And one thing that's interesting is CigarMedics tells me that the formula isn't so great for candela tobacco. Now, I don't know how applicable this is because I don't know how many cigars have candela in the filler, but they said because of the way candela holds moisture, the formula conversion from moisture content to relative humidity isn't terribly accurate. I don't know how inaccurate, but it is an interesting little sidebar. All right, so as far as use cases are concerned, the obvious one is like, is my cigar ready to be smoked? But I think there's a couple more specific ones. So this right here, these three cigars, are the brand new Yawa from J.C. Newman. They are just now shipping to stores. Now, one of these three cigars, I don't really know which one, has been sitting out on my desk since it got here, so for over a week now. Another one of them has been sitting out for about 24 hours, and the other one I pulled just from the humidor. So what's going to be interesting here is that if I just sort of inspect them manually, this one has it just cracked there. I would guess this is probably not the one from the humidor. Now, Yawa's a pretty unique cigar, but I felt like it would be interesting enough. I'm guessing that's probably the one that stuck out the longest. That one maybe is the one that's been out for a little while. Nope. I'm guessing, if I had to guess, just based off a feel, this is the one from the humidor, this is the one that's been out for 24 hours, and this is the one that's been out for a while. The beauty here, though, is that this device should be able to tell me. An important thing here is that, let's say you were really anticipating and really wanted to smoke the Yawa, and you wanted to make sure that you weren't wasting a cigar because it wasn't in good smoking condition, but you also wanted to smoke it sort of, you didn't want to wait any longer than you had to, this device would be good. So if you're buying cigars and they're getting shipped to you, this is a great way to tell when your cigars are recovered from their journey in the mail. And just based off of that, that's not a very good sign. So you can see one was at 71 or 72. That one's at 34. Looks like I'm going to get this right because this one is probably going to be at 0. And that's what happens. So you can see there, that is one particular use case. And not to keep sort of giving J.C. Newman some free airtime here. This is a cigar. This is a Diamond Crown Cameron Select that I found in a bag at the bottom of a box from, I guess, when we moved. And it had probably sat out for, I don't know, at least 8 months. It's a Cameron wrapper, so it's very delicate. It's a cigar that I'm curious to smoke. It's an old cigar at this point, but it's a cigar that I definitely am going to want to wait to try to smoke it. You don't want to smoke Cameron when it's dry. And so if you're ever in a situation where you're trying to bring back a cigar that is not been stored properly, this device would also be another great way to tell how well that's going. And it's actually kind of how this device came about from what I understand. So you can see here, it's at 50% relative humidity. I don't have a baseline reading of this. I didn't actually have this device when I found this sitting in the bottom of a box. But you can see here, it's probably not ready to be smoked. I'm guessing I probably could smoke it, whether or not I could cut the cap without damaging it. But this is another very good use case for this device, which is trying to bring back those old cigars. In terms of some other very common use cases, I think if you're a retail shop owner or if you're someone like us that owns large cabinet humidors, but particularly if you have a walk-in humidor, I think having a device like this where you can go around and sort of figure out if there's hot spots or dry spots in your humidor, test it, various cigars in the corners and up top and down below. I think something like this could be helpful to know whether or not the humidity is getting around your humidor in an effective manner. Similarly with the Yawa, I think if you're a retailer and you're trying to figure out whether or not the cigars that just showed up in a shipment are ready to be placed onto shelves, this device could also help. And I think the beauty here is that this device is $30. So that means if it can help save, say, 3 cigars where you aren't sure if they're in good smoking condition, and you can avoid having to throw those 3 cigars out 5 minutes after you light them or even before you light them because they completely fall apart, then for most people, this device is probably paid for itself. For some of our readers, if it saved 1 cigar, I imagine it would be worth its weight in plastic. All jokes aside, I would recommend the HumidiMeter. When it first showed up here, though, I was a little bit skeptical. I was skeptical of what it was actually doing, and now that I know a little bit more, it makes sense. But I was also skeptical of the use case. And then it sort of dawned on me that I'm really not the target audience for this. Here at Halfwheel, the cigars that we review, we try to make sure that they spend at least 30 days before we get around to smoking them, from the time that they show up at the office to when we start smoking them. And so we avoid a lot of the problems of a cigar being under-humidified in transit or over-humidified in transit. It still happens, but if cigars are having issues by the time that we've waited 30 days, it's likely a more widespread issue than it wasn't shipped with a Boveda pack. And so when this device showed up, I wasn't sure how useful it would be, but talking to consumers and talking to some other people, if you're buying a lot of cigars online or having cigars shipped to you, this seems like a very worthwhile investment, because it's one of those things that you can pull out and just make sure that you're not putting yourself in a bad situation. And it doesn't take very long, and it's relatively accurate as far as I can tell. And most importantly, it's not that expensive. And so it may not be something that I use every time. I think I'll probably do it when I'm about to smoke a very expensive cigar or a cigar that I'm going to have trouble replacing, and I just want to make sure I'm not heading down a bad path. I think for a lot of consumers, they're going to find this to be, a sense of security. The one thing I will say about this, and I think it's important to remember, is that this device can only fix or address issues with not being able to smoke the cigar at an optimal humidity level. It can't do anything to fix a cigar that was bunched improperly. It can't do anything to fix a cigar that gets cut improperly, or a cigar that you don't light properly, or a cigar that you let go out multiple times, or a cigar that was made with bad tobacco, or even a cigar that was like this Diamond Crown, maybe left out too long in not optimal conditions and just lost a piece of itself because the oils evaporated or because it got too hot or too cold, etc. This can only deal with making sure that the moisture that's on the tobacco itself inside the filler is in a good spot. And for that, it's a better device than we have than anything else in the market to say yes or no to that question, but it's not going to remove all of the construction issues that you have. And so if you're expecting this to be sort of a life-changing, every cigar in my humidor is now going to be perfect device, this is not going to be it. But as long as you just look at it as a tool, sort of how you look at a meat probe like a tool, and understand that at the end of the day, a bad brisket, even if it's cooked well, is probably still going to be a bad brisket, then the HumidiMeter would make sense for you. For more reviews of cigar accessories, whether that's humidors, hygrometers, humidifiers, I guess, or cigar cutters, lighters, ashtrays, and then some, as well as reviews of cigars and cigar news, legislation, etc., please check out halfwheel.com.